Motorcycle Men. Time now for Rider Rides with your host, Ted Kettler. Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to another installment of Rider Rides here on the Motorcycle Men podcast. I am Ted, your host. Rider Rides is where you, the listener, has the opportunity to tell us about why your bike is great and why you ride it and what makes it your bike. Doesn't matter what you ride, where, or how you ride. The important thing is that you do. That bike you just heard is from today's rider, and that guest joining me here in the corner booth at the V-Twin Cafe, all the way from, where are you from?
Mill Valley, California.
Oh, there you go. Mill Valley, California. The co-host of the Throttled podcast, none other than Larry Lanes. Hello, Larry, and welcome to the Motorcycle Men podcast.
Woohoo! Hey, thanks, Ted. Great to be here.
I'm glad you could make it. So, I have you on here because I want you to tell us about your bike. But first, I want you to tell us about your podcast.
Oh, well, actually, it's not quite my podcast. It's Kevin McKinney started the podcast, and I joined him about 6 or 8 months into it. He was looking for a co-host, and since then, he and I have been doing it together. And recently we added Chris Geis, and it's just been for me just been a lot of fun to do. It's kind of organic. It goes where it goes, and I'm going with it. So who would have thunk when I started out that I would even be doing this?
Who would thunk? How many years have you been on the show now?
Oh, gee, this is, I think, about 2 years now, or a little over 2 years.
Actually, because I remember when Kevin first started, he was solo for a while. And then
he was solo
him
for about 6 months, yeah.
And added a whole different dynamic to the show. And now you've added Chris.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think you did that because you're trying to copy the Motorcycle Men podcast, I think.
Absolutely. We worship at your feet.
Well, your demise is very soon at hand then, I can tell you that. Well, listen, so why don't you tell us a little bit about the bike that you ride? What bike do you own?
Okay, so right now, this current moment, I own a Harley Davidson 2012 Switchback with ABS.
Wow, so that's a Dyna Series motorcycle.
So this is, that's right, the lately demised Dyna Series. So this is the last of a succession of bikes that I've had. I had started off with a Suzuki Marauder for those who love the Suzukis, and then I went to a BMW R1100S, and from thence I sort of completely changed tack and jumped on a 2007 Sportster.
I love my Sportsters.
I do know you love your Sportsters. And I'll tell you, I started off with that bike, and a brief story about it. When I bought it at a Triumph dealer. I rode the bike, and I liked it because it was so different from the BMW.
Yeah.
But I brought it in, and I said to the salesman, I said, this bike sounds kind of loud. And he laughed and he said, well, that's the Harley, But I rode it home. I did buy it. I proceeded to buy it. And I rode it home and I said, boy, this thing sounds really loud. So I took it to my mechanic. Before I rode home, I was afraid to take it into my neighborhood.
Wow.
Because it was so loud. And I said to my mechanic, Bill, doesn't this sound loud to you? And he smiled, and he went into his shop, and he came out with a really long screwdriver, and he took the screwdriver, and he stuck it in the back of the rear muffler, and it went all the way in, no obstacles. The previous owners had completely taken out the baffles from the slip-ons, so the bike was operating without any sound deadening at all.
Wow.
Yeah. So at any rate, I went with the Sportster, and then I, just to kind of vary my menu, I bought a used BMW F700 GS. It's kind of a adventure bike.
Right.
and I liked it, but it was so civilized. It was like riding a sewing machine, but very comfortable, great suspension,
I will refrain
And-
from saying anything. But go ahead.
Okay, and then finally, I decided to sell both of them and to go to the Switchback. And one of the reasons was that I really wanted to do long distance touring, and I needed something that was just a little bit more capable than the Sportster.
Well, don't you think that the BMW would have done exactly what you needed it to do?
Yes, it would have, but that wouldn't have worked with what I'm going to talk about in a few minutes.
Oh, all right then. So before we get off of this bike, your Switchback. Why did you choose that bike? Is it primarily because you wanted to do some long distance riding?
Yes. So there were two things that working sort of together with it. One was that I wanted a bike that I could do long distance touring on, but I really didn't feel quite ready after the progression of bikes that I just mentioned to go onto a big 800 plus pound bagger. The Switchback had just come out a couple of years before, and for those of you who are not familiar with it, it's called a Switchback because it can convert from being what looks like a bagger to what looks like just a cruiser. You can take the bags and the windshield off. They both have quick release. And then you have a cruiser-looking bike. If you put the bags and the windshield back on, it looks kind of like a little bit smaller Road King.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So, but I that wasn't the reason I really bought it. I bought it primarily because it was a little bit smaller Road King, and I didn't feel ready to move up to the big baggers yet.
Right.
And then the second reason that I got a Harley Davidson Switchback was because I wanted to have somebody to ride with. And what I had been going through is that nobody in my immediate circle,
Right.
age and or otherwise, rode motorcycles. And the only one who I knew that I was close to who rode a motorcycle was my older son, who got me into this in the first place.
Yeah.
And he had inconsiderately moved away from home.
Damn him.
Darn him. So he was no longer available to ride with. I had some BMWs, and I looked into riding with some guys on BMWs, but the Northern California BMW Club had meetings that were way too far away for me to attend, and their quarterly rides were camping rides. In fact, their motto is they ride to camp.
And camping is not your thing?
And camping is not my thing. I did my obligatory camping when I was younger.
So
now I motel it when I.
Right. So your idea of roughing it is that the ice machine is broken at the hotel.
That's right. My idea of roughing it is an inexpensive motel. So one day I was sitting in the dealership waiting for my Sportster to be serviced, and I got to talking with a guy who was in the lounge with me. And he invited me to join the Hog group that was based from that dealership, Harley Owners Group, which I did.
Yeah.
And there I found a group of riders that rode every weekend, that were accessible from where I lived, and who don't ride to camp, they ride to eat.
There's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that. Bingo.
Absolutely not.
So my choice of the Switchback was based both on the nature of the bike itself, and also the fact that it was Harley and allowed me to join the group.
Right, and also it enabled you to obtain sustenance.
And plus that I was able to partake of the riding to eat as well. Yes.
Okay. Can you give us some details about the bike? Things like tank size, seat height, weight, etc.
Yes. So as I said, the bike looks like a slightly smaller Road King, and the specs go along with that. It's got about a 4.7 gallon tank, which is a little bit disappointing. My Sportster had a 4.5 gallon tank, and I thought, yeah, and I'd actually thought it would have a 5 gallon tank, but it turns out it's 4.7, and the problem with that is that the Hog guys that I ride with all have just about all of them have baggers, and the road glides and the street glides all have 6-gallon tanks.
Yeah.
And so they can ride longer than I can. So on a long distance ride, that can be a factor. So I usually have to carry some extra gas in my bags to account for that. The seat height is about 26.5 inches,
And
depending
that's
on
not bad at all.
right, depending on the seat. And I do like that. If I'm going to ride a bike that's relatively heavy, I want to have my feet firmly planted on the ground.
Sure, absolutely.
And the other thing about Harley Davidson bikes in general, I find, is that they're well designed in terms of their center of gravity. They have a nice low center of gravity, and even the big baggers are amazingly maneuverable and light feeling.
Yeah.
Unless you let them lean over too far, and then that's a different story.
That's a different story.
Yeah. So let's see. The weight of the bike is about 720 pounds.
No kidding. It weighs that
Okay.
much?
It does.
Wow.
Yeah. With the
I
bags.
would have never thought that.
Yeah. So a Road King weighs about 810. So
Okay.
I'm still about 90 pounds lighter than the lightest bagger that I could have gotten into. The engine is, interestingly, the engine is the same engine that they use on the bigger baggers. It's a 103 cubic inch engine. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's a dual cam, overhead valve engine, and the transmission is a 6-speed. So I get good, it cruises great on highways, and I've had the bike up to certainly illegal speeds, and it has no problem. It has no problem cruising at over 80 mile per hour speeds. Let's put it that way.
All right. Now, you bought that bike brand new, or was that used when you bought it?
I did not. I bought it actually from another guy in the club who was a road captain who's wanted to move up onto one of the big baggers, and so I bought it from him. And when I bought it, it had about 12,000 miles on it, and I bought it about 2.5 years ago.
And you've put on how many miles since then?
About 30,000.
Excellent. I applaud you, my friend. That is
Yes.
fantastic.
So it has about 42,000 miles now.
That is great. Have you made any modifications to the bike?
It's a Harley. Of course, I made modifications.
You know what the rarest Harley Davidson is?
Yeah, the unmodified one,
That's exactly.
stock Harley.
What modifications have you made?
Well, what I've done quite a bit. So I changed the seat. It came with 2 seats. It had the original seat and had a sundowner seat. And
Sundowner is a pretty good seat, actually.
it is a pretty good seat. It's quite comfortable, and it added about an inch to the height of the bike,
True.
the seating position. But that wasn't a problem for me. However, what was a problem for me is that after the first long trip that I did, I found that I really, really needed a backrest.
Ah, yes. Yes.
And so when I got back, I embarked on a search for seats with backrests, and that's quite a trip. And it actually turns out to be pretty expensive.
Mhm.
There's almost no way you can get an inexpensive seat with a backrest.
Right.
Even used seats are costly, and a backrest addition to a seat alone is generally around $300 just for the
insane.
backrest part.
That's
Yeah, it's
insane.
insane. So, but at any rate, I did proceed. I added a Mustang seat, took off the sundowner, and made it into a solo. So I can't ride 2 up at this point.
Mhm.
But the Mustang seat has a nice backrest,
Oh,
and
great.
it also lowered the seat height a little bit, which I'm not so crazy about. But I got used to it.
It lowered the seat height, and it made you uncomfortable?
It did because it moved me a little bit closer to the pedals, and I didn't
I
need
see
to
what you're
get
saying.
any closer. It actually made me feel a little bit cramped initially, but I got used to it, and after a while, I was okay.
All right. Well, how tall are you?
I'm about 5'9", and I
Okay, so
have
you're not. So you do have some stretch in your legs there. So why don't you tell us what other modifications did you make?
Yeah, so I did the seat. I changed the windscreen because buffeting is for me have been an issue since I had the Sportster.
Yeah.
And so I've really studied it quite a bit and read a lot about how to reduce buffeting. And the two of the things modifications I made, which have just about virtually eliminated buffeting at any speed, is one, I got a clear view windscreen, which has a vent in it.
Yeah.
So it has a vent. It also has the upper lip curve at the top of the windscreen as well. But the major feature, I think, of the windscreen is that it has a vent in it, and that does help to decrease the buffeting.
Now, when you say the buffeting, is that the sensation you have like somebody's pounding you on the back of the head?
That's right. It's where your helmet is kind of vibrating to the point where some people actually literally have gotten concussions from buffeting, severe buffeting.
That's severe.
And I found not so much a concussion, but over a period of time, it became extremely fatiguing and even would cause a headache. Now,
the windshield that you have, is the top of the windshield above your head, or is it even with your eyes?
No, actually, I found that the other issue about reducing buffeting was to get a windscreen that was over, that I had to look through.
Yes, that's what I eventually did, because my windshield originally came just below my eye line. And it's not so much the buffeting that was bothering me as, well, maybe it was the buffeting because it would hit me right in the face. So I eventually went to a 21-inch screen, which put it above my head.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there you go.
So mine's a 19-inch, and it puts it above my head, which I'm not crazy about. I really would prefer to look over the windscreen normally, but it's definitely preferable to buffeting.
Yeah, there's pros and cons to the taller windshield as opposed to the shorter ones. Like you said, you can look over the shorter windshield, which on a rainy day, if you get caught in the rain, is a good thing.
Right.
Because you see the downside to that, again, you hit the buffeting. So,
but
go on.
So that summarizes that. And then I did put some wind sort of fenders on my shocks, on my down tubes.
Right.
And those because a lot of the buffeting actually comes from under the windscreen, not over it. And so anything you can do to reduce the amount of wind that's coming through and bouncing off the fuel tank can be helpful. So I put that on, and that also has helped. So like I said, with those two modifications, I've virtually eliminated the buffeting.
I have those lowers that you put on there, those little wind deflectors on the forks.
Yeah.
Did that at all affect the engine heat?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
I actually checked with the guy who I bought them from. This was a manufacturer in New York, a small company, because most of the other deflectors were not available for the model of my bike, but he made them specifically, and he insisted that they would not interfere with engine cooling, and so far I don't think that has been a problem.
Oh, excellent. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, so there's that, and then I let's see, windscreen. I added a rear bag. I have a accessory rack on the back, and I added a bag for that, and I can put a bag on the front of that when I go travel long distances, so that I can make sure I have enough room to carry stuff. And with that and the bags that are on the bike, I'm able to pretty much carry whatever I need for a long trip.
Oh, that's great. Now, do you notice any handling differences by adding those extra bags?
No. The main difference I notice, of course, is with the bags that the hard bags the bike comes with. Since they're easily removable, I can ride the bike with the bags off, and then the bike is definitely lighter and more maneuverable.
Have you done that?
I have. I have. Yeah. Sometimes if I know that I'm going to be commuting in heavy traffic, I'll take them off so that I don't have to worry about them.
Do you lane split?
Of course, I'm in California, and I lane split.
I applaud you. I don't know. I don't know that I would do that.
Oh, yes, you would. If you're sitting, let me tell you, if you're sitting in 95 degrees and the traffic is stopped, and the heat is coming up from the engine, and you're thinking that your bike could overheat any minute, you're going to lane split.
Well, it
Now-
does get that hot here in Jersey, but
Yeah.
we're not allowed to lane split.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Well, I will say that when I lane split, the only time I actually lane split is when traffic is stopped.
All right.
And if I lane split when traffic is stopped, I'll lane split at 5 or 10 miles an hour.
That's exactly
Right.
that's what you're supposed to do.
So I'm not, if the traffic's going 40 or 50 miles an hour, I'm not going to lane split in order to keep moving up, which I see a lot of guys doing.
Yeah.
I only use it for the most dire situations where I'm afraid of overheating either the bike or myself, and I really need to get out of there.
Well, what's more important, you overheating or the bike overheating?
Yeah, well, both of us. It's important that both of us survive. So there's that. Now, let me. So the other things are the previous owner had added a CB transceiver to the bike.
Oh, really?
Yes, and my helmet has it plugs into that and has a built-in mic and speakers, and that CB transceiver also came with a Bluetooth, so I can, so I put on a phone mount and I can have my phone connect up to the CB transceiver and then therefore to my helmet, so I can use my phone for directions, phone calls, or music.
So do you have like a Sena unit as well?
No, I don't have a Sena unit.
So you don't talk to other riders then when you're out there?
Yes, because I have the CB transceiver.
Oh, so that works the same way then?
It works. The CB transceiver works for other riders that have a CB radio.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
It won't work for riders that have a Sena.
Ah, okay.
So all the people in my club have CB transceivers. That's the standard, and that's sort of what Harleys come with. Or that when you order an option, that's the option you order is a CB transceiver.
Oh, that's interesting. I did not know that. That's very interesting. So why don't you tell us, do you have any more modifications you made?
Well, let's see. I added a cup holder.
That's a very important modification right there.
Very important modification because you have to keep your fluids up in hot weather. And let me think. The other things I added are more or less cosmetic. I added some leather covers for the bags and a black cover for the primary and stuff like that. Just I added an engine guard and highway pegs.
So the highway pegs.
Yeah, yep. So the bike really is very comfortable cruising long distances.
I think the highway pegs make a huge difference, especially if you are doing a lot of highway riding. Because I know I have them on my bike and I use them all the time. In fact, looking at the picture of your bike, I have the exact same ones.
Oh, really?
That I use, and I have them. Yes, the exact. You got those from Harley?
I did.
Yeah, that's the exact same ones that I have. They're very comfortable, and I just love the way they work. They're great. I think my only complaint about them is that they happen to rust because I live near the ocean, so that's a problem.
Yeah, that's a problem. That hasn't happened yet. And the final thing that I did to the bike is I added a Vance and Hines slip-on, and then a Fuel Pack 3. So because just with the slip-on alone, I was getting some popping, deceleration popping, and banging. So I added Fuel Pack onto it, and that cured it. So the performance may be a little bit better, not a whole lot, but definitely I don't get the backfiring, and I'm able to see all my engine statistics on my phone.
Oh, no kidding.
Using the Fuel Pack app, you can see your revs, engine temperature, and all sorts of stuff.
You know, it's interesting because I've seen a lot of guys do that Fuel Pack upgrade to their bikes for that sole purpose that they can do all that stuff and do some actually tuning on the fly.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, have you noticed, like you said, you noticed a little bit of a performance, but has it been significant? Did you know any difference with your fuel mileage at all?
Yes, the fuel mileage is a little bit worse.
It's worse?
It's worse. And the reason is that one of the adjustments the Fuel Pack made was to actually make my fuel mixture a little richer.
Oh.
Because the popping and deceleration popping and stuff was part of having a bit too lean a mixture.
Mm-hmm.
So with the richer, slightly mixed, more O2, more oxygen in it, and more a richer mixture, you get a little decrease in fuel mileage. So
I had no idea.
yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
but the bike now that has, like I said, has no popping at all, and or explosions. So that to me is preferable.
Oh, that's excellent. So what type of riding do you do mostly with the bike?
Well, I used to when I was working, and as you know, I am no longer working.
Shut up.
When I was working, I used to use the bike to commute when I wasn't riding my bicycle to commute.
Right.
And I also now I don't do that anymore, but I do use it for my local rides. When I want to go for a ride on the twisties around here, and of course we have a lot of gorgeous roads.
Yes, you do.
So I love taking the bike out. It works well on those roads, and I also use it for long distance touring. I take it out myself and I ride alone, and then on most weekends I go out with a club, and we usually have one or two club rides on the weekend.
Right.
And there we ride in a group. And then I like at least twice a year, if I can do it, to get out on a long distance ride.
Oh, wow.
And,
when you say long distance ride, what is the longest ride you've done with this bike?
About 4,600 miles.
No kidding.
No kidding.
That is very impressive. So
Yep.
tell us about that. How far? So what did you cover with that ride?
So on that particular ride, I went. It was a ride that I did with the group, with a club, and we went up the coast. We went up Highway 1 through Oregon, through Washington. We went into British Columbia. We stayed over a number of places, but we stayed over in Vancouver. Then we headed on up through Whistler Mountain and east through British Columbia, which was absolutely spectacularly gorgeous.
Wow.
And then we went through Alberta, which was also gorgeous, down through Jasper and into Montana. And we went to Glacier, and we went to Yellowstone, Grand Tetons, and then down through Wyoming, and the group actually continued on down through Utah, but I broke off there and rode home alone, going through it was Wyoming and Utah, Nevada, and then into California.
No
So
kidding.
that was about a 10-day ride, about 4,600 miles.
So how many miles were you averaging a day?
Well,
What was your longest day? Let me ask you.
the
that.
biggest day was about 600 miles.
No kidding.
Yeah.
How did the bike perform on that whole ride?
The bike was flawless on that ride. It was absolutely flawless. And never had a problem with it, and it was reasonably comfortable. The only upgrade that I would like to make in the near future is the front springs and rear shocks.
Yeah.
I'd like to upgrade those. The bike, like most Harleys, has very little travel, and therefore it's not exactly a marshmallow type ride. but other than that issue, it's decent enough now. Other than that, the bike performed flawlessly, and I had a ball. And I have to say that going across some of the 80 mile per hour speed limit highways, I tested out how fast the bike could go.
Oh, you did you?
I did.
And were you satisfied with the results?
Well, no, actually, I wasn't.
Oh, no, you weren't. Oh, do tell.
I was. I needed to be going slightly downhill and with the tailwind to break 100.
Oh.
And I really thought it would be able to do better than that. I'm sure if I went to some of the other engine mods that are available, I could probably do that. In truth, the biggest problem I had was that on some of the 80 mile an hour speed limit highways where we were passing at over 80 miles an hour, I didn't have that much get up and go.
Right, I understand. Yeah. Well, a lot of people don't think of the Dyna series of motorcycles as the bike you would want to do a 4,000 plus mile tour on.
Right. Right, and I feel that some people have done around the world tours on Vespas.
Exactly.
Yeah. So to me, it's less the motorcycle than the rider. I did some long distance touring on my Sportster, and I had a ball. I didn't have any problems with it. So
Well, the Sportster
I don't
is
think
a world of bike. That's a bike
it
you
is.
can do anything with.
It did, and I made modifications to it to facilitate that kind of riding. So I don't think you need to have an 800 plus pound bagger of any
absolutely not.
make in order to do long distance touring. My bike was very comfortable, and I've ridden Road Kings and Road Glides, and my bike is not that much less comfortable than those bikes.
Well, listen, I met a guy about a month and a half ago who had a Dyna Wide Glide, and he has ridden that up to into the Arctic Circle, up there to Prudhoe Bay, and down into Mexico. So, you're not restricted by the bike. The only thing that's the restriction is yourself.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's what I think.
So, what do you like most about this bike?
So, the thing that I like about the bike is the low center of gravity, the fact that you don't feel the weight of the bike unless you let it tip over a little bit too much. Other than that, it's very, very manageable. In addition, I find that it handles quite well. I think it's quite responsive. I ride it on twisties all the time. In fact, I did a weekend curve clinic, and I did it on a track, and so I was riding with the sport motorcycles, carving the turns on this racetrack, and I was scraping my floorboards like nobody's business, but I didn't have any trouble maneuvering the bike in that kind of setting.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so I think that because of its weight, its low center of gravity, and a slightly shorter wheelbase than the baggers, I think it's a much more maneuverable bike. And let's face it, most of the riding I do is not going to be long distance touring. It's going to be riding on local roads that are curvier and twistier, and I don't necessarily want to be taking a huge bagger out on them.
Understood.
Yep.
So now the one question I like to ask all of my riders is, what color is the bike according to the manufacturer?
So the bike is I believe it's called a Sun Glow Crimson Red, or maybe it's a Sunset Crimson Red. It is actually, I think, a very appealing color.
It is a very nice color. I like it. It's a very nice color. I just find it funny about some of the names that they come up with these colors.
Yeah, no, they really, and some of the Harley names, especially Vivid Black,
Let's make the absence of color vivid.
Right. Yeah. Okay. But no, it's a nice color. It's actually, having had to replace or repaint some parts, it's actually it's a multi-layer paint job.
Oh, wow.
And so whatever you want to criticize Harley Davidson for, one of the things that they really do well are their paint jobs.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So now, although the Dyna Series motorcycles are no longer available brand new from Harley Davidson, they're still available. Somebody could still get one of these if they wanted to.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So why should somebody consider this bike?
Well, I would say pretty much for the same reasons that I did. If you're looking for a bagger type bike that is smaller, lighter, and just all around easier to use than the road glides, street glides, and all of that ilk, this is a good bike. It's the other thing I didn't mention, but the engine for me has been absolutely reliable. You don't get the most power out of it as it comes stock, but it runs smooth. There's very little vibration, which has been a problem with some of the switchbacks. Vibration.
Right.
There's very little vibration in my bike, and the engine has been utterly reliable, and transmission have been utterly reliable. So, for those reasons, I think this is a good step-up bike for somebody who wants to get into a slightly bigger, more capable bike than a Sportster, for instance.
Understood. Now, when did they discontinue this model?
2016.
Oh, so their bike's not that old. You can definitely still find these motorcycles.
You can still find them, and they're still pretty pricey. I'm really amazed. The bike new was about 17 grand.
Right.
And actually, I saw one dealer in Iowa or someplace like that has a new one still on their floor, and they're still selling it for $17,000.
Oh, that's insane. That's crazy. But hey, if it doesn't have any miles on it and it's brand new, it hasn't.
No, that was brand new.
Well, see, then it's by all means, it's worth it. So now, at the beginning of the interview, you had a tone in your voice that gave me the impression that perhaps you're moving on to a different type of motorcycle.
Very astute there, Ted.
Hey, I have a couple brain cells I tend to rub together occasionally.
Very astute. Well, I have to say that the drawbacks to the bike are what I consider to be drawbacks in general to Harleys, which is that their suspensions are just not that great, and so I'm think. Oh, and the other thing is, I've seen a number of the club members drive up to some of the meetings on BMWs.
Ah. Uh-oh.
And uh-oh is right. So I talked to them about it, and they're kind of like saying, oh, yeah, these are good bikes.
Okay.
BMWs, And I'm thinking, and these are stalwart club members, so they're road captains.
Right, yeah.
For Pete's sake. So if the road captains are saying, the BMW is really the bike to get, what does that mean? So, my favorite bike really of all time is a BMW R1200 RT.
Oh, okay, yeah. That's a very nice bike.
Right, and I had the R1100S, which uses the same engine basically, and I really like that. So I do keep my eye on the ads to see about what's available in the R1200 RTs, and you can get a 2005, 6, or 7 RT, even a 2008 or 9 RT for not that much money.
Really?
Yep.
Oh.
I saw an RT 2005 with low mileage, about 25,000 miles, 4,500.
No, really? Are you serious?
Okay. I'm serious. In good condition.
What year was it?
It was a 2005.
Oh.
So it had ABS, it had traction control. It had a lot of it had the bags. It was in good condition. It was the paint was good. It was about 25,000 miles on it.
Well, brand new, that bike is going for 18,400.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow.
Brand new is out of the question, but I'm telling you, you look at the prices of some of the bikes around that period, and you can get a low mileage bike for not that much money.
I'll say the only difference. Well, I should say only. One of the main differences between your BMW, like for example this R1200 RT, that and your current bike, is that you're not going to have the same amount of leg positions to put yourself in for your comfort. You're locked into a chair sitting situation with this.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And I've not ridden an RT, so I can't attest to the fact that I would like it if I actually rode it.
Right.
But boy, I think they are so beautiful and swoopy, and
it is a very attractive bike. I'll give you that. It is very attractive. I have never ridden one. I have sat on them, and for a guy of my stature, it's just not for me.
Too small. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you might need to get something like a K1600.
Yeah, I mean, I need something allows me a little more reach, that allows me to stretch out, and I think that's which again, at the same time, I'm contradicting myself because I like the Sportsters, and even though that sometimes, in some cases, forces me to sit in a more of a cramped situation, but I don't know what to say about that, but. Yeah, and maybe if you go over to the BMW dealer and give this a try, you might be riding home with it.
Well, let's just say that I am interested. There are a number of dealers in the area that carry used bikes and that do offer test rides. So as soon as I get my shoulder back in working order, that is something that I'd be interested in doing.
And what becomes of the Switchback?
Well, now that's a very interesting question there, Ted. And if I continue riding with my hog group, which I like doing, then I'm going to keep the Switchback because I need a Harley to ride, just like the other guys in the club who are sporting two bikes.
I see.
So I would do that. Of course, I would have to make some sacrifices in other areas to keep the domestic tranquility in that case, shall we say.
I understand. So when's the shoulder going to be healed?
Well, it's going to be probably 3 or 4 months more in order for me to get that in shape. Yeah, this is a big deal.
No kidding. What did they remove your whole shoulder and then put a new one in there?
No. This was a tendon repair. This is a rotator cuff repair.
I understand.
And so they did have to put anchors in my bone.
Oh.
And reattach the torn tendon, sew it up, and reattach it to the bone. So there is a long recovery period for this.
Wasn't there like a witch doctor somewhere you could have gone to avoid all that?
Yeah, I tried those. It didn't work. Yeah. Did a lot of physical therapy. So
you're going to be off the bike for another 3 or 4 months?
I am going to be off the bike for another 3 or 4 months.
Is there any kind of physical therapy you can do to speed that up?
Well, I am doing physical therapy, actually. I've started now. Passive exercises only. We won't go to active for probably another month. And there isn't a whole lot that I can do. My arm is in a sling now.
Yeah, I see that.
You see it?
Yeah.
And the surgeon told me to keep it in a sling for at least 6 weeks because that does facilitate the healing.
Wow, that's crazy.
So
when you say passive physical therapy, is that kind of like you just sit there and think about it, or how does that work?
So actually, the idea is that you use in many of the exercises, I use my other arm to lift my arm,
right,
and to push the range of motion that I have.
I see.
So they're passive in the sense that I don't use the affected arm to lift or to move. I have to use my other arm or put my hand on the wall or on a desk and slide it using the other hand.
So you're actually not physically supposed to move your arm.
I'm not physically supposed to move my arm under its own power.
I see. I
can move it with my other arm or using other objects, but I'm not supposed to move it under its own power.
I understand. So, this is the Motorcycle Men Physical Therapy Show.
Yes. Well,
so I would be so bad at that because I would say, like, I'm moving my arm. I would just be so very bad at that. No.
Well, I tell the truth. After about 2 weeks, I took the sling off and I was walking around without the sling, and I thought, this is great. I was going for hikes and stuff, and then I saw the surgeon, and he was horrified, and he explained to me, which he could have done earlier. He explained to me that keeping the arm in the sling helps to elevate the elbow such that the tendon on the top of my shoulder is not stretched.
I see. Yeah.
So it takes the tension and weight off of that tendon, and thus facilitates the healing process.
So there you go, boys and girls, right from Larry Lanes. Who knows? Man, if you get your arm in a sling like this, listen to the doctor.
Listen to the doctor.
And keep your arm in the sling.
Yeah.
And
so that I'm doing that to facilitate my healing and to get back on the bike sooner.
Right, because you're going to need that. It's your throttle arm.
That is my. Actually, it worked fine as my throttle arm, but if I had to twist the handlebars too far to the left, it hurt.
So you can't make any left turns.
So I can make a very slow and gradual civilized left turn.
So basically, for your own safety, you should only make right turns then.
So for my own safety, right turns and straight is about the way I can go. Yeah.
So when you get the BMW, then I fully suspect that before the end of the year, you will have that 1200 RT in your garage.
You think?
I think so.
All right. Well,
you seem to be a prolific motorcycle purchaser.
You never know. Well, yeah, I have been through. Well, I'm making up for lost time, Ted. I only started this about 13 or 14 years ago, and I got a lot of riding to make up for.
You got a lot of catching up to do. All right,
I do.
I understand. So before I kick you off,
and we've gone longer than 15 minutes.
Yes, I know, and you will be the very first ride interview that I've done that has gone beyond 18 minutes. So
it's such an honor.
It's quite all right. I appreciate it because you had things to say, and I appreciate that. So why don't you tell us a little about how people can listen to the Throttled podcast and hear your smooth, buttery voice?
Yeah, well, that I don't know about, but it is the Throttle Podcast, and you can get the Throttle Podcast through iTunes. Just search for Throttled, or you can go to throttled.com, throttledpodcast.com, and find it there. And you will listen not only to my mellifluous tones, but Kevin's and Chris's as well.
Excellent, Larry. I want to thank you very much for joining me here on Rider Rides on the Motorcycle Men podcast. I would say ride safe, but at this point, all I will say to you is walk safe.
Yeah. And for everybody else, make sure you ride your own ride.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Larry.
My pleasure.
If you'd like to be featured with your bike on Rider Rides, here's what you do. Go to the Motorcycle Men website at www.motorcyclemen.us. Go to the episodes page and fill out the form and submit. If selected, all you have to do is provide us with a soundbite of your bike, and you'll get a one-on-one interview with your host. Thanks for listening, and keep on riding. One more thing, kids, please visit Cycle Gear for all of your motorcycle and motorcycle clothing needs. With 136 stores nationwide, you're bound to find one near you, and they will definitely get you whatever it is that you might need. And if you go to the Edison, New Jersey store, be sure and tell them that the Motorcycle Men sent you, and they'll take care of you. Go over there and see Chainsaw Ginny or Sean. And Tobacco Motorwear. For the best in stylish and comfortable riding jeans, go to Tobacco Motorwear and get yourself a pair of Kevlar-lined riding jeans. These are fantastic. This is what I wear. This is great stuff. And while you're there, get yourself a Kevlar-lined California riding shirt as well. Great-looking clothing, and they offer the protection you need while you're on your bike going for that long ride. And when you order, make sure you tell them that the Motorcycle Men sent you. And make sure that you use the coupon code MOTORCYCLEMEN when you're ordering.